adjacent neighbors, starting at 6:15. Actual product that we built. We're just finishing up a similar townhome deal in the Lindbergh area in town. It's a 3-story townhouse, 2-car garage. Every townhouse has a 2-car garage. Pull in your garage. There's a bedroom and a full bath on the back side of the garage. You go upstairs to living, dining room, and kitchen, and then on to the top with the bedrooms and baths. We built this as a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath. We've also built it as a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath. The exterior is essentially 100% brick. The used different colored brick. There was a lot of discussion, like Carl said in the last meeting. I do have some photos. I just wanted to bring an example, some sampling of interior and exterior shots of the actual townhouse. The reaction to this brick color was, in the last meeting, was it needed to be red, Williamsburg style. And this is meant to show you that this is a real product that's been built, and it's not something that we're thinking about. For those purposes, we're not married to that brick color, not married to every detail. We're just trying to demonstrate the quality of the product that we intend to build. The interior features, for those of you that can't see, granite countertops throughout, wide plank hardwood floors on the main level, most likely in other areas of the house. Most of our buyers upgrade to that. An upscale cabinet, upscale light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, and an improved or a higher end appliance stainless steel package. Some coffered ceilings, just everything. A lot of the details that you would expect in a townhome of this caliber in this area. Like Carl said, some of the things that were asked of us that we, the way I like to describe it is some of the same concerns that you would have as an adjacent property owner. I have the same concerns for the prospective buyers of my townhouses. We don't want to look into everybody else's garage, and we don't expect anybody wants to look in our garages. So there'll be adjustments made relative to site conditions along the creek to screen our stuff from adjacent stuff. And I don't know how, I've got a kind of an existing conditions on this. I know it is hard to read, but it shows how much for you guys that are not, for folks in here that have not been on this site is literally developed just to the bank of the creek in most areas. The parking lot and the curb goes right up to the edge of the creek. And as Carl was saying, we're going to pull most of that out, and that will be replanted to buffer standards relative to the city's regulations, if you will. So with that, any questions? Yes, sir.
What is the price point for your product?
We think in the mid-4s. Will we stay there? I don't know. But we feel like that's a good number right now.
What's your square footage?
About 2,500 square feet.
That's not
Relative to
not the garage, though.
It's right at 2,400 square feet heated.
Dennis?
I've reviewed it in fair detail, so a couple hours worth, and it seems to me that with the removal of as few as 9 and as many as 12, you could satisfy not having to encroach on the setbacks from the creek. And you could also solve the problem as a concerned staff, from what I read in the documents were sent to us preparing for this meeting, about the fact that the distances behind each of the parking areas, the garages, et cetera, is not adequate enough to allow emergency vehicles through. And it seems to me if you reduce the density from 81 to possibly, say, 70 or 72 or 69, you would solve all of those problems. You might have to charge 10% more, but is that something you would consider?
I have, obviously, I'll answer it like this. Losing units is always the easiest way to accomplish something like that. That's not, you can imagine that's not the first place we'd like to. I mean, this is the way I feed my children, so, if we plan something that makes sense, then we'd like to keep it there. There's a little bit of tweaking that we can do with this plan to pull like the corner of this out of the buffer.
That's where I got the
That's-
9 units, which ones you'd have to pull to allow more space for the ones at the bottom of that plan, with the parking and the egress, et cetera, for emergency
Right.
vehicles.
So as far as, I'll answer it two ways. Number one, I think that some of this encroachment with a little bit further tweaking can be accomplished. Number one. Number two, the emergency access will have to be approved, and it's being reviewed at present by DeKalb County Fire, and if we have to adjust, we think we have a plan that's approvable based on what we've done in the past. But, we'll surely do that if need be. One of the things that's peculiar, if you will, about this site is seldom do you run into a site where there is greatly more impact in a buffer than you're proposing. And so, as we met with staff, the multiple times we've met with staff, we felt like collectively that the plan had kind of gotten to a spot that was ready to move forward with all things considered, with the impact that on that creek as it sits relative to what we're proposing.
Thank you.
What are you selling these for in Brookhaven, or in Lindbergh?
The last ones that were sold were in the right at $350.
And you're building the same product?
Relatively the same.
I mean, that's,
The difference with that, I'll give you the caveat to that answer, is that when we started that, I think that site would command the same 400 plus. But we started at a price, and we could only run the price so high relative to getting things to appraise and such on
you're
that site.
surrounded by apartment buildings there, aren't you? That look similar to that. That doesn't look, I'm not trying to beat you to death on this, but you're bringing a product here that's not built for our neighborhood. It's built for, it's cookie cutter. And those are apartment buildings with separate entrances. They're not, in the last meeting, we all agreed that the product across the street, those townhomes are beautiful. This is, it's not in keeping with the neighborhood, and we just built this beautiful parkway, and you're gonna plop that down? I don't think that's gonna encourage it to turn into something unique and special.
Well, I will tell you that where we built this, in the Lindbergh area, it was in keeping with the neighborhood, and it's some of the nicest stuff
I
there.
think it's surrounded by apartment complexes.
And so we'll go through the same process in Dunwoody, and that is that we'll get some more feedback, and then we'll continue to tweak it. I think if I were a concerned resident in Dunwoody, in your shoes, that I would be concerned that, a lot of my concerns would be eased by the fact that we've committed to this level of finish, if you will. I mean, if you take...
The outside's the problem, not the inside.
It's not the brick. But what we did not talk about, what we talked about in the first meeting was the traffic issue, about 160 cars coming in and out of that, because if it's a 2-car garage with a 4-bedroom family coming in, we talked about how the numbers that he offered were a little off about what was realistically happening at this light up here. And when he proposed the 7 to 12, that maybe that would be a lightening of the traffic issue too. So maybe that can be considered.
For those of you that weren't here, we did say that we would look at the design, not just the color, but also the design to make it more in keeping. We'll get back to you on that. With regard to the traffic, you don't have much traffic now because you don't have anybody in the buildings, and I know that's not really a valid comparison, but we think this is a better situation than obviously re-tenanting the office, and we, as I said, have not gotten any response from the city on access issues. So we'll work with them and hopefully have some response from them on what's appropriate before we get back with you as neighbors.
When you work on this, you look across the street, because I don't like those stairs to the side. And I would like to see, forget those balcony wrought iron pieces, and have nice big windows. Make it look like it is $400,000, because I don't wanna cheap out what's going in the village compared to everybody else's homes, et cetera. I'm sorry.
And we live right in that neighborhood, and the houses are barely getting $425,000 for a freestanding renovated house, and that's not gonna bring.
Well, I don't repeat myself, but I think we said we're willing to look at all that, and this is a transition. I mean, we're on the other side, we're facing the post office, so it's a transition. And
What
we're
are you
trying
gonna do
to
about
do-
security? Security in that area, because anybody in Dunwoody Village could walk right in. I mean, I would not buy a townhome, and I'd like to have less square footage, because I would be worried about the security there.
Marie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think on the original plan, years ago, when we were talking about this, we were looking for something in the village for empty nesters.
Right.
People 50 and 60 years old.
Right.
These have no elevators. I mean, everyone's looking for, we live in Brook Farm, and everyone wants in there because
Right.
we have masters on the main. These, are they built, I can't see people with children moving in there, there's no place to play. I can see
Well-
older people, 50s and 60s moving
Well,
in there.
I'm not going to play developer, but I will say that's a question that came up before, and we said we would respond on that. There was a lot of talk about requirements that they could accommodate elevators, that you did not want four-story units, 4-bedroom as opposed to 3-bedroom. And again, those are all things that we are hearing for the first time. We'll respond to.
Can I ask you why your brokers went into current businesses? You do have some businesses in those buildings, and said, we're coming in and you're out December 31st and take a hike. That you were gonna pull down 1530 at that time. Now, why can't you do month to month till you at least get your zoning and work out these differences that the community has with your project?
And then it wouldn't be empty.
We went around and talked to every, that's not true, everyone that would, every business that's in there, except for 3 or 4, that the broker had already talked to. And all of those leases, most all those leases were, before I even came on the scene, had month-to-month leases. So all the leases, I have a copy of all the leases, and we have I get a big spreadsheet that shows whose lease is up when and all this kind of stuff. And part of the provisions in all those leases were for someone to tell them, basically let them know what's going on. So as soon as I got this thing in the contract, I went around with the owner's broker, and we talked to everyone that we could talk to. I think I was involved in all of them except 4. I think he went to 4 folks without me. And all of those people got the same understanding, and that was, here's what we proposed, here's who I am, here's what we propose, here's the schedule as is laid out by the city, here's how we will go about it, and if we're successful, these are the dates you'll need to look for something.
Well,
else.
that
So-
attitude didn't come across to service providers to this community. And I did, I used a service provider in the 1530 building. And they were they had a lot, they were just stunned at the way the man came in, Paul Johnson, and presented himself, and, well, too bad, we're gonna take this over, and you're gone. And it's expensive to move a business. So I don't understand, when you don't have all your zoning, why you're gonna tear down the building until give these people a little more time to find space.
Well, I have to look back and see when we went and talked to him, but it was at least a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. And if someone misunderstood, no one that we encountered was upset. Most everybody that we talked to said, we knew this day was coming, we've already thought about it. And there's actually a couple of big tenants in those buildings that have already have spaces that are being finished for them in other places because they knew that this was an eventual process.
Bob?
So,
I don't know if the rest of the board or the folks here remember, but you and I have met before, and that's over by this gentleman's houses, on the townhouses you built over on the other gateway. Glaze Drive. came into a Glaze Drive situation with the current zoning in place, current landscape plans in place, agreed to certain things that are going to be done. You took it over from the gentleman who went bankrupt. We're asked to go to arbitration because you weren't fulfilling those requirements. You walked out of arbitration because you didn't want to do the job. So your track record, and I'm a nobody, but the track record as far as this community, this DHA board spent over $5,000 in a lawsuit that was filed against you and against the county for allowing those townhouses to be built with the quality of products built on that site. And be careful who you walk out on, because nobody comes back and bites you later at the end. This product, one of those pictures you see there, is not the vision I don't think anybody in this community had when the redevelopment of the Dunwoody Village Parkway took place. If you want to look at townhouses that are in the $400,000 to $500,000 range that should be built at Dunwoody Parkway, look at the ones across the street from the elementary school, from this library, okay, with the bricks, the staggered fronts, the big windows, they look like townhouses that belong in Dunwoody. This looks like something that belongs just outside of downtown Decatur. This is not the project, and I'm a big supporter of townhouses on Dunwoody Village Parkway. Don't get me wrong. I want the whole thing. I want people living in Dunwoody Village to the nth degree. I believe you have somewhat of a shaky reputation for what you've already built in Dunwoody. I think the DHA has already gotten that with you once. Okay? And if this is the end product, what it looks like from the outside, then this product is totally unsatisfactory for the building of Dunwoody Village Parkway. And the millions of dollars that this community has invested in that parkway to end up with this type of product. I don't care about the insides. You can put Formica countertops in for all I care. Okay? When I see what I got on the outside of these buildings, that does not fit the quality of the image of Dunwoody Village and the city of Dunwoody. And Carl, you and I can talk about it later if you want.
Well, I'll just respond. I don't have the history on this property or the other one you mentioned, but I think with regard to appearance, I mean, we've said several times tonight that's the first issue we heard, and that's the first issue we'd like to address. With regard to people following through on conditions, I would hope you know that it's in my interest certainly to get something that's as clear and enforceable by the city or the neighborhoods as anybody else. So there's never a question about it. It's the last thing I want anywhere.
You talk to your client about Glaze Drive. If you talk to him about Glaze Drive, you go look at Glaze Drive, and you go look at the zoning and the landscape plans for Glaze Drive that are approved by the county, which this gentleman refused to follow, and this gentleman walked out of arbitration that we were supposed to try to work out a settlement. Okay?
The only thing I can control is to try to make sure we don't have a misunderstanding here, and I've said I'll do the best I can to do that.
Somebody has their hand back up there. I can.
Yeah, I just have a question regarding the.
Excuse me for a second. I don't want to leave and not have responded to that comment about the DeKalb County deal. And I respect your time and heard and let everybody hear your version of it. And now I'd like for you to respect mine and let me tell everybody my version of it. So it was a deal that I inherited from someone. Suffice to say, I built the thing. I went through every process that DeKalb County required. Part of that process is submitting a landscape plan, planning that plan, having that inspected, building the houses to a certain criteria that the zoning conditions required. Per DeKalb County, I met all of those conditions to the extent that they issued me COs. The COs were issued, the townhouses were sold, and this, what happened in their, interpretation of what I did or didn't do. Once you get past this process, the governing authority in any particular jurisdiction has enforcement powers, and those are the people that I have to make sure that I comply with. And in our industry, that's what anybody does. And so I did that, and I got the proper COs, and so that's my version. Yes, ma'am.
As a spouse of a business owner in those current buildings, we had no idea any of this was going on. No one from our company was contacted. The first we heard of it was an email from Councilman Terry Knoll.
Which
So
building are you
the
in?
fact that you met with all but 4 or something is a little discerning to me.
What's the name of it? Do you care to call it, or tell me which
Building.
building you're in?
1534.
Yeah, I was not involved in the
To my knowledge, no one has still contacted them other than the email that I forwarded to my husband and, well, my husband got the email from Terry as well, but to his business partner, and they were like, what? We gotta start looking for office space? What? I'm like, I don't know, this is the email I got.
I don't know which ones Paul has talked to, but I know that I talked to just about every person in these buildings, and I can't remember standing here which other ones I have a list. But if you weren't informed of it by them, then I apologize. The businesses that have leases, no one's trying to kick anybody out of their lease.
We need to tell them that, because they have leases.
Let him, okay, let's not try to interrupt, let's be respectful, please.
All of the leases, most all the leases were 30-day leases, month to month. And so the people that have 30-day leases, we were trying to be preemptive and tell people what was going on, because I didn't want this very thing to happen. I don't want to show up on your doorstep one day and say, by the way, per your lease agreement, you got 30 days to get out. That was never the intent. And so that's the reason a couple of months ago that we started going literally door to door and meeting with folks. And I can tell you from my experience, everyone that I met with, that I walked into, was expecting the visit. They didn't know all the details, but most of them said, we knew that we had a 30-day lease, a month-to-month lease, and we knew this day was coming, we just didn't know when.
Well,
We
still don't know when it's gonna be.
I'm curious about the timing, because, you know, you've had your one meeting with the neighbors, there's definitely some feedback, some things that need to be changed, but you all start, like, the ball is rolling in terms of the city, so you can say you're gonna change something, but you get that RM100 zoning change, and there's nothing to say that you will. So, I would like you to speak to where the neighbors are gonna be the process, where the DHA is gonna be the process, to actually make sure that we're gonna have a product that we're happy with.
Well, let me say comment on the schedule. As I said, we weren't able to, working with Terry and Tara and others, we came up with a meeting tonight before the DHA meeting with the neighbors. She and I have talked about a meeting. I know Tara said she's going to be out of town, I think from the 20th through the end of the year, so we're trying to meet before that. The Planning Commission, I think, is the 13th, Phil, at the front of January. Look, we know if we don't have answers on these things, we're not going to keep that schedule. We do want to move it forward. I know the holidays make it more difficult, but we're certainly going to try to get some response and get some of these things narrowed down before Christmas and certainly before the end of the year, and then we'll reassess where we are. If we don't have answers, I mean, the last thing I want to do is go forward with a bunch of people upset at the Planning Commission.
I mean, today is 8th, 7th or 8th?
We'll be sure you know this Thursday is the community.
Is the
No, I
council, right,
understand
so
that,
that's
too.
like your first public meeting is.
Right, and you and I talked about the fact that you've got elections and don't hear cases in January to the DHA meeting. So the schedule's a little jumbled, but the outcome and the intent to hit certain milestones is always the same, and that is to have an agreement with everybody before we're asked people to vote on it.
Yeah, Developer Moss, have you already closed the purchase on the property, or is it contingent on rezoning?
I have not closed it. It is contingent. It's not contingent on rezoning, but I haven't closed it.
But you're already advising them that they only have a certain amount of time in their.
I'm trying to work with the present owner, and that was his wish, is I don't want no surprises. So we've told people the relative schedule as we know it. And the relative schedule is what David has laid out.
But I understand, when you're working with businesses, not co-owners or renters, that they're used to 30 days, and if people in a business need a little bit longer in their rent time frame, leases and stuff, and I don't know what you've got planned, but I mean, what you could actually do is